One of my favorite American sitcom shows of all time has got to be this silly little show that was shot on a shoestring budget that originally aired on FX, now FXX, a satirical show that sometimes pokes fun of pop culture, American culture, other media, and even geopolitics, sometimes with surprising insights. And the show that I'm talking about, of course, is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. When you think of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you don't normally think of it as a political comedy or a woke show, and for the most part, it isn't. If anything, it mostly parodies popular movies such as Die Hard, $1 Million Baby,
I will eat your babies, bitch! Free it!
Nobody's eating anybody's baby.
and the entirety of Lethal Weapon.
We don't want her bringing him back from the dead again.
It's a good point. Where's Mac? He's in the bathroom. Well, that's not gonna work. I mean, we can't. It's fine. Just go.
He's in the bathroom. He's in the bathroom.
Charlie, it's not. We can't. I mean.
They also dip into taboo subjects that you're not really supposed to poke fun of, such as religion,
Am I gay for God? You betcha.
child
If
abuse,
the McPoyles got blown and Charlie got blown, then why didn't I get blown?
cancer,
Look, the girl, she wears a Lance Armstrong bracelet, okay? So I tell you that I have cancer, right? Then you're gonna tell her, she's gonna feel sorry for me, we're gonna start dating, and that's the way that life works!
abortion,
It's a child, not a choice!
Pro-choice is pro-death!
Wow, great record!
and even race.
Right. She started talking about acting class, and you know, we weren't expecting.
Yeah, we weren't expecting
you to be black. That's all. Right.
It's just a really funny show that usually puts their characters into funny scenarios, utilizing the what would be a funny thing to happen rule, which usually works. But occasionally, every once in a while, the show will throw a little satire towards the socio or even geopolitical sphere. The show pokes fun of things such as the gas crisis,
What the gas prices will be.
And what are those?
These are gorgeous women with heaving breasts.
Why?
climate change,
Let's take the bus then.
Do you have any idea how much pollution a bus causes?
I don't know. 3?
3?
North Korea,
Hey, attention! Our first contestant hails from North Korea. That's right, North Korea, everybody. She's gonna be doing something or other, and then we're gonna blast her with water from a hose.
I
MAGA,
think it really completes the look.
See.
You know, let's see it there.
Oh, shit, he's right.
Thanks, brother.
Now let's go save this country!
They even had a grandpa of some of the characters who was a literal Nazi.
Great for you. You must be really proud of yourself. Awesome. Your grandfather's a Nazi.
But the show never really goes out of its way to make a commentary or statement, although it's not hard to tell where they stand on some issues. It's mostly all just played for laughs. But that being said, there was an old episode that described a conflict so succinctly for its time that you would have never expected it coming from a show like this. Introducing the episode, The Gang Goes Jihad.
We will crush your skull with our weapons!
Now, on its surface, it's lampooning the war on terror, obviously. The episode works its way towards the conclusion where the gang, left with no other choices, stupidly decide to scare away the new owner of the bar by dressing up as stereotypical terrorists, speaking in guttural gibberish with weapons, and labeling their tape the Jihad tape. But looking back at this episode as a whole, there was a surprising amount of details describing a very specific conflict in the Middle East.
My name is Ari Frankel. I just bought the building next door.
Oh,
Great, man. That's awesome.
I purchased it a few months ago, but I was just able to move my family into Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah. Where from?
Israel just got to be too dangerous. I mean, you know, with everything that's happening.
Well, that's a tough situation you got over there.
Anyway, it's all good. Stopped over to give you this.
What is this?
Notice to vacate.
What?
Yeah, according to the zoning grid, the piece of property that I purchased extends exactly 100 feet to the north. Anything south of that dividing line belongs to me. Gonna need you out of here in a week.
You can't do that.
Hey, Dad, stay out of this. We can handle it, all right?
Look, man. I don't know how you guys do things in, what was it? Israel or whatever, but this is America. You can't just come in here and steal our land from us.
I'm pretty sure that's how this country was founded in the first place.
A new businessman moves into town to buy a property that already belongs to someone else, and he happens to be Israeli, That seems very specific. Now, if you didn't already know this episode is specifically talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict back in 2006. Now, back in those days, I'm willing to bet that most Americans probably didn't know much about the conflict, let alone that it's been happening for decades, myself included. But this episode of this very random comedy show seems to understand it quite well. For starters, let's take this cold opening scene. We have an Israeli businessman coming in to claim property that is already owned, Patty's Pub. This is a direct reference to what's been going on and is still going on in the West Bank. Israel, from its conception, has always been a settler colonial project, and its founders basically admit that outright. The historic land of Palestine technically belonged to multiple empires depending on the time period, but to keep things brief, they used to belong to the Ottoman Empire, where Muslim, Christian, and Jews lived in relative peace. If only we can go back to that. Then, after World War I, along with the Arab Revolt, the Ottoman empires lost these lands to the British. Afterwards, we saw an increase in Jewish migration into the land of Palestine, where a Zionist project was sought after. And as more anti-Semitism was rising in Europe, more Jews migrated into Palestine, building more settlements. Tensions were rising, and depending on the school of thought, the Zionist project was to either carve out a piece of Palestine to form a Jewish national homeland, or take all of it. This was of course opposed by many indigenous Arab Muslims and Christians alike, who would see it as a takeover of their land, which they can't even control, which would eventually lead to another Arab revolt, this time against the British and the Zionist movement. Fast forward a bit to after World War II, which saw the genocide of the Jewish people by the hands of the Nazis. We start to see something new, yet oddly familiar at the same time, happening in 1948. The Nakba, or the catastrophe. And this time we're starting to see a different wave of Jewish Zionist movement inside Palestine. This time not in the form of immigration, but in the form of military force. Now, prior to the fighting, there was a mandate devised by the UN to partition Palestine into two states, where 55% of the land would be made into the Jewish state, even though at the time Jews only made up about a third of the population, and only own about 5% of the land. Math ain't mathing. You would see why this would upset the Arab population, who saw this as an unjust taking of their lands. So, with the help of surrounding Arab nations, they formed their own armies and militias to defend what they still saw as Arab land. On the other side, the Jewish side, they had their own militia groups and armies, and though at this point they were no longer officially backed by the British, many of their veterans had previous training in weaponry from World War II, and they were battle ready from the start. Now, when it comes to war, you're inevitably going to see atrocities committed by both sides, but if you're going off the numbers, the Israeli forces committed a whole lot more. And some of those stories, I swear to you, sounds like you're talking about Hamas. Speaking of numbers, here are some. Over 6,000 Israeli Jews were killed. About a little more than 2,000 of them were civilians. An estimated range of about 8,000 to 15,000 Arabs were killed, a lot of them civilians. And a lot of these civilians were missing, that is to say that they were either never found or accounted for, or they were buried in mass graves. Sounds a little familiar. 400 to 500 Palestinian Arab villages were destroyed on what is now the State of Israel, and about 700,000 to 800,000 Palestinian Arabs were displaced and became refugees. And by the end of this war of 1948, the State of Israel was officially established, controlling over 78% of the land, which was way more than the original partition plan of the UN. What was left of Palestine was not an official state, but basically the regions of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, controlled by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip, controlled by Egypt. I promise I will connect this to the episode of It's Always Sunny very soon, just bear with me. Now, let's fast forward to 2006 and beyond. We're skipping a whole lot of history here, but let's get into the West Bank, which is in theory supposed to be controlled by the Palestinian authorities, but in reality, they only control certain areas. The other areas are basically now under Israeli occupation, which has only grown since the occupation started. The occupation itself is considered illegal under international laws, and within the occupation, Israel has been building settlements, which is also illegal under international law. But not only have they been building settlements, many times they have been literally forcing Palestinians out of their homes and basically stealing their houses using various loopholes with land ownership. Like sometimes it's a Jewish guy who's literally from a place like Brooklyn, taking these properties away from indigenous Palestinians, which I don't even care about international laws at that point. It's just a dick move.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is gonna steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي. Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this.
So that was basically the long way of explaining the opening scene. Patty's Pub is the West Bank and is in the process of being stolen by an Israeli settler who just moved into town. Fun fact, Benjamin Netanyahu, who was originally born in Israel, went to school in Philadelphia.
Apparently, Mr. Frankel is citing a zoning grid that was created by the original city planners.
Wait, so this asshole's using a law that's like 300 years old? That's bullshit.
That is a waste of time.
Solutions.
Yeah, let's talk
Solutions.
How do we get this guy out of our bar?
Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as though you guys have any legal recourse.
We don't have any legal recourse.
We don't have any
legal recourse, right? What you're saying is, we gotta get creative.
If you're implying that I'm advising you to do anything illegal, then I'm afraid you're mistaken.
Oh, no,
We would never want to implicate certain parties in certain matters.
But if certain parties who has certain experiences or connections,
certain affiliations,
affiliations could give us some tips or pointers, or even, you know, connect us to one of his guys, we could really
Get out.
Now in this scene, we have the gang asking a lawyer what legality the Israeli businessman has to be able to take their bar from them, which the lawyer explains that he was using some archaic zoning law, which Dennis calls out for being BS, for being like 300 years old. And I've seen this scene compared to one of the main pillars of Zionism, that Jews used to have their own kingdom on these lands like 3,000 years ago. Thus, these lands still belong to them. It's basically a very hyper-violent and hyper-illegal form of land back. Now, it's worth noting that there are different types of Jewish people, of many different races, and there are indigenous Jews that have lived on these lands, Arab Jews, or Mizrahi. But there are also Ashkenazi Jews, Black Jews, not to be confused with Black Israelites, which is a totally different thing. Let's not get into that right now. There are Ethiopian Jews, which, fun fact, there was a time when Ethiopian women who just immigrated into Israel got sterilized without their consent or knowledge. If only there was a term for that. There are Reformist Jews and there are Orthodox Jews, which, fun fact, some are anti-Zionist because they don't believe that the state of Israel should exist until the true Messiah comes. Of course, they are not the only anti-Zionist Jews, as many Jews all around the world can be anti-Zionist, but not necessarily because of their religious belief, but because they know that the current ongoing occupation is violent and wrong. Fun fact, there are evangelical Christians here in the state that believe that a Jewish state of Israel is necessary to fulfill the prophecy of the return of Jesus Christ, to trigger the end times or the rapture. They also believe that those who do not convert to Christianity at this time, including Jews, will be damned to hell. Another fun fact, Israeli leadership always seek the support of these evangelical Christians more so than they seek the support of American Jews. But my point is, after 3,000 years, and the fact that Judaism is a religion that you can convert into, you can't really say that you have a claim to these lands anymore. Like, even with Islam, you have Arab Muslims, Sunnis, Shias, Black Muslims, white Muslims, and even Asian Muslims. Even in Christianity, you got multiple different races that are definitely not what the original Christians were. Like, I was baptized and sort of raised Catholic, even though I don't really identify as such anymore or practice as much. Also, I was raised a little bit Buddhist, but that's a different story, don't ask.
They are completely conflicting ideologies.
But anyways, it would still be kind of weird if a bunch of Asian Catholics started annexing Vatican City and saying that we have a rightful claim to these lands. It would also be a war crime. Also, this scene is very funny in that the lawyer is played by an actor who is brown but not Arab. In fact, I think he's Indian. And the gang, who are very white, don't seem to know the difference, which is a funny commentary in and of itself, because if you're brown in America, you're seen as either South American, including Mexico, some sort of Asian from an island or jungle, or Arab.
I think the lawyer's right. We gotta send this guy some kind of message.
It's definitely time to take action, but we should be careful because I don't want to come off as anti-Semitic. This guy's Jewish.
No, what's that have to do with
person.
anything, dude? Yeah. Well, we don't have a problem with Jews. It's this guy in particular.
Whoa. Jewish, okay? He's Jewish. Don't use the word Jew. I don't appreciate that.
No, that's okay.
That is a racial slur, Charlie. And
calling somebody a Jew who is a Jew is not a racial slur.
And then if you use the right context,
Charlie,
you're good. You're the most misinformed person that I've ever met. You don't even know what's going on in Israel.
Okay, that's right. You don't know what's going on in Israel. Maybe you shouldn't be speaking on the subject.
Are you guys serious?
Yes. Maybe you should leave it to me.
I'm sorry. Do you know what's happening in Israel?
Of course, bro. I read the newspaper.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Why don't you crack an egg analogy all over me? Okay. Can I start?
Yeah.
There's a war on terror, Charlie. Have you ever seen CNN? Okay. George Bush right now.
Yeah, well, start from the beginning. Saddam Hussein has the oil.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh.
Charlie, we have decided to help the people of Israel
to give our oil back to us.
By defeating Saddam Hussein.
My head is like swelling
It's
with knowledge.
freedom, Charlie.
Like wonderful knowledge.
No, you're being
sarcastic when we're talking about our...
You can't hide from it forever.
You're an idiot. You're an idiot.
This scene is still very funny to me, and also still very relevant. Now, they're trying to plot something against their antagonist, but they also want to make sure that they're doing it not because he's Jewish, but because he's a dick. So we need to be clear about this. Anti-Zionism is not the same thing as anti-Jew or anti-Semitism. Criticizing Israel, which is a Jewish ethno-state, is not the same thing as criticizing all Jews, despite what some Zionists and even some non-Zionists would say. Fun fact, AIPAC is a lobbying group that advocates for pro-Israel policies within the US, and they are very well funded and lobbies to both Republicans and Democrats alike. Israel is a foreign state, by the way, and they have a foothold in our democracy. If you still don't see this as problematic, imagine if this was a pact for the interests of China or Russia. Fun fact, the pro-Zionist propaganda machine is very strong in Israel and overseas, and they've been hard at work for decades. This is known as Hasbara, or explanation in Hebrew, but it works to whitewash Israel's war crimes or to obfuscate debate around Israel-Palestine.
And you will say, what? You want us to make you look good? That's not my job. Your job is to make us look good. Our job is not to make you look good, American Jews. What do you have to worry about? Years in the army, 2 years in the army, some of us 5 years, and then for the rest of our lives, you have got to serve 2 or 3 years in the army of words. You've got to learn to fight the political battle, which is even more important at this point than the military battle that we'll fight. You've got to learn how to fight back on the campuses, how to make the arguments. Now they keep shifting. Don't let the war of words ever be fought about Israel's nature. Let it be fought about why you can't accept Israel, why you have to single out this tiny people. Try to find Israel on the map. It's hardly there. You know, are you going to really tell me that this is the country you want to blame? Push the envelope. Teach them how to defend by attacking. Teach them really what one says as in fencing. You've got to do that. You've got to make demands on them. They've got to serve for 3 years in the army of words.
Just because you are a part of a marginalized group that had suffered a genocide does not give you carte blanche to commit a genocide of your own.
And I would like to use the rest of my time to say how appalled I am that people are bringing up the Holocaust. Do not use other genocides to describe this one. I have been...
Oh yeah, this ought to do it. Yeah, okay, so what's the next step? There is no next step. This is it. This is it? Yeah. This is your plan? It's awesome. This isn't gonna do shit. What do you mean this isn't gonna do shit?
There needs to be a next step or something.
Hey, do you know how hard it is to get toilet paper off of a building, especially if it rains?
That's true.
This Jew's in for a ton of work.
Whoa,
what?
Whoa,
Come on,
man. You can't say things like that.
I don't know what I said. What did I say?
You dropped a hard J. Huh?
Yes. Yeah. Jew? You guys said it.
Shh. You can say it, but it has to be in the right context.
I said I could say Jew.
You can, but
you
in
said
the
I
right
could call
context,
in the right
man.
context. Well, what is the right context?
Well,
all right.
Person of the Jewish faith, right? In a group of other people from the Jewish faith.
Then I
this
said
guy's got a
ton
of work to do.
I think it's okay that he's Jewish. That is not
Yeah,
what
but
I'm
that's
saying.
not what he's
okay.
like. Okay, hold on a second.
Okay, you guys don't know what the hell you're talking about.
This man is in for a ton of work.
We
He's
know
Jewish.
what we're talking about.
Yeah, we know what we're talking about that.
Yeah.
Yet another hilarious scene, the hard J thing and them arguing about whether to use Jewish or Jew always reminds me of that scene in The Office where Michael Scott thought the term Mexican was offensive.
Let me ask you, is there a term besides Mexican that you prefer? Something less offensive?
Mexican isn't offensive.
Well, it has certain connotations.
Like what?
Like, I don't...
Now, I don't think they're making any sort of commentary with the TPing besides the powerlessness of Palestinians going against the Israeli occupation forces, but I do see a small parallel with the first Intifada. If anything, the next scene of Charlie suggesting them throwing eggs seemed to make that connection stronger.
Gentlemen, I've got something here that's gonna send our friend on the first train back to Israel.
Eggs.
Yeah. These eggs are organic. They're like 3 times the size of normal eggs and twice the price. If this doesn't show this guy we mean business, nothing's gonna.
I'm in.
Okay. Whoa, what are you talking about? You're in.
Hey, it's something, Mac.
Oh, it's something. Let's just do something.
I wonder how long it took me to get that toilet paper down.
Didn't even notice the toilet paper.
Now, how can we describe the first Intifada in terms we can understand? Imagine it as a combination of the civil rights movement with something like the George Floyd protests. Intifada basically means uprising, although originally I believe it more closely meant to shake off, as in to shake off your oppressors, which was what they were trying to do. But you have to realize that most Palestinians who were protesting only had rocks at best as their weapons. Some may even have slings, but they were going up against an overwhelmingly powerful military opponent that is backed by the most powerful superpower on the planet, the United States of America, a giant, if you will. If only there was some sort of old biblical story that all three major Abrahamic religions can use to create some sort of analogy.
على عهدي على ديني على أرض تلاقيني أنا لأهلي أنا فديهم أنا دمي فلسطيني 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 أنا دمي فلسطيني.
In terms of their living conditions, Palestinians living on Palestinian lands were living under Israeli occupation, constantly subjected to raids on their homes and living under repression, and those living on Israeli lands were living as second-class citizens. So why wouldn't they want to revolt against their oppressors? Now, all that I just mentioned is the backdrop, but there still needs to be an inciting incident similar to the death of George Floyd that sparked the 2020 BLM protests. There were two events. The first was when an Israeli businessman was stabbed to death in Gaza in early December 1987. By the way, back then there were settlements in Gaza. Not so much anymore these days. Not so much anything anymore these days in Gaza, unfortunately. Then, days later, an Israeli vehicle crashed into two vehicles carrying Palestinian workers, killing 4 and injuring 10 at a refugee district in Gaza. Palestinians had believed that this was an intentional retaliation for the stabbings days previously, and they took to the streets to protest. It should be noted that a lot of the protests early on were in the form of non-violent protests, such as organized work stoppages, boycotts, and demonstrations. As for the violent protests, at the highest level, there were Molotov cocktails and a handful even acquired grenades and firearms. But for the most part, the iconic imagery of the first Intifada were of those throwing stones, many of them teenagers and children. The official Israeli policy to dealing with this, by the way, was to literally break their bones. These orders were given by then Defense Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who, fun fact, eventually became the Prime Minister who was the closest to ever achieving a sort of peaceful two-state solution before he was assassinated by a far-right Israeli law student. So the guy who instructed officers to literally break children's bones was the closest to achieving peace between Israel and Palestine. That's wild. But I bring this up because remember that opening scene in Sunny? Well, funnily enough, Charlie was just getting his cast removed on his leg because he had them broken in a previous episode. And although I don't think this is directly related to the bone-breaking policies, it's just a funny coincidence.
What? Where is it?
What the hell is this?
He put up a fence. He didn't notice the toilet paper, Mac? He put up a fence.
He walled us in.
He walled us in! Where does it end and where does it begin?
This guy's good.
Right, okay, this guy wants to get extreme. Let's get extreme. Screw the eggs. Back to the bar. Plan B.
All right, back to...
Plan B.
It's locked. You guys have your keys?
Go around the front. Go around the front. Go.
Fine. Wait, hold on. It gets thinner.
I'm trying. It gets thinner, Dennis. Wait, don't push me.
Wait.
Wait. My toes got in the fence.
It's fine. Just go back.
I can't. You guys got to go. Stop yelling. Go over.
We'll lift you.
Don't climb, Dennis. Don't climb. He put up a wall. Climb over.
Climb over and get out.
The son of a bitch. The son of a bitch.
Another scene that totally went over my head the first time I watched it, but is now blindingly obvious. It's the Gaza Strip, guys, which is fenced all around the border. The southern border is controlled by Egypt, but everywhere else is controlled by Israel, including the land, air, and sea. And they control resources like water and cement and movement going in and out of Gaza. Well, except, I guess, for hand gliders. There were rare exceptions where they allow Palestinians to travel in and out of Gaza and Israel, but under very strict rules that, even if broken slightly, would void their privilege of movement, nay, their freedom of movement. Almost half the population of Gaza is under 20, which makes life expectancy abnormally low, and the standard of living is subpar as a majority of the people there live under poverty. Gaza, after October 7, 2023, has also been under heavy bombardment, which had laid waste to a majority of northern Gaza and the rest of Gaza and killed up to 40,000 people so far, of which over half were women and children. Estimates might even have the death toll up to 100,000. And as of the time of filming this, virtually all hospitals have been either damaged or destroyed. Medical supplies going into Gaza are heavily restricted, and electricity going into Gaza has been shut off. There have even been footage of Israeli citizens stopping aid trucks, going so far as to vandalize and robbing the supplies going into Gaza. They are also coordinated with Israeli authorities because, of course, they are. Also, I'm pretty sure targeting and bombing hospitals is a war crime.
Okay, you guys ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Okay. And action.
أنا معك أخذها اللي أنا معك أخذها دموعي لسه.
Cut. What the hell are you doing, dude?
That's what those tapes sound like.
Why don't you read the script that I wrote?
I'm not reading the script you wrote. It's in English. It's riddled with spelling errors.
Well, you know what I'm trying to write. Just say it.
I'm just gonna mumble some guttural sounds. Let's do another one.
He's not gonna know what you're saying.
Well, then we'll do subtitles or something.
How am I
really
gonna
feel like
do
I should have
subtitles?
something in
Bro,
my hands? You don't need anything in your hands.
Like a weapon, a machete, or a
He doesn't
machine
need
gun or something.
Okay, why don't you head down to the Wawa and pick up a machine gun?
Read the script.
I'm not gonna read the script.
Who's the director here?
I don't care. I'm not reading the script.
All right, fine. Action.
Bro, can I get my towel over my face again?
Yeah, put your towel on your face.
All right, here we go.
Action.
ليه أنا ما أخذت.
I'm gonna get a weapon. I'm gonna get a weapon.
He's gonna go get a weapon, everybody. Everybody get a weapon.
I don't really think I need to explain what this scene is referencing or why it's so funny. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's probably the quintessential way most Americans view terrorists, speaking Arabic via guttural noises. And the terrorist group being referenced is clearly Hamas. Now, how do I explain Hamas without getting canceled? Firstly, they are designated as a terrorist group. This is true, but they are also the governing body of the Gaza Strip, having been elected in 2006. And they have committed horrific terrorist acts. The biggest one was obviously the attack on October 7, 2023, where they slaughtered and kidnapped many Israeli citizens along with some foreigners who attended a music festival outside of the Strip. And I know what you're gonna say.
Do you condemn Hamas?
Do you condemn Hamas? Whether you condemn what Hamas did.
Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn 9/11?
Yes, I condemn Hamas action. I condemn any act of terrorism, any act of brutality, and any killing of innocent civilians. So therefore, I also have to condemn Israel's bombing of civilians, their use of white phosphorus, their killing of unarmed protesters, and the terrorism of the Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Now, I don't care if Israel say they give warnings prior to their bombing, or that they say they do their very best to minimize civilian casualties. Which, by the way, if this is their best, then they really suck at it. And I don't care if they're technically targeting a hypothetical Hamas terrorist who's taking a dump in a deep underground tunnel beneath someone's home that they bombed. This is genocidal and collective punishment, which is, fun fact, a war crime. Some of the language coming out of Zionists are also very unmasked and genocidal, saying stuff like reducing Gaza to a parking lot or that the entirety of Gaza is up for bombing. This does not seem like defense to me. But let's talk about Hamas real quick. Yes, they are a terrorist organization, but they are also the only form of resistance in Gaza specifically. Now, they are certainly not the most moral or ideal form of resistance. They're very fundamentalist, which I am certainly not a fan of. But Gazans don't really have much of a choice. But I know what you're thinking. Didn't Gazans elect them? Yes, sorta, in 2006. And remember how I said how nearly half of Gaza are under 20 years old? That means most Gazans were either not born yet or weren't able to elect Hamas at the time. Hamas didn't even win a majority, but a plurality. But long story short, they started attacking and killing members of their own political opponents, the Fatah Party, and then gained full control. And they haven't had any elections in Gaza since. But here's another thing about the election of Hamas. And as much as I blame George W. Bush for the majority of our problems in the 21st century, I can't solely give W the L for this. Now, he did urge the election to move forward, even though he was told that Fatah didn't have enough time to build support to win the election. He was foolish not to consider that a people who have been living under heavy oppression for decades wouldn't elect an extremist faction. But that's only part of the story. Probably an even bigger contribution to Hamas winning this election was the fact that Israel was supporting them almost directly. Netanyahu's position was to prevent a two-state solution by installing Hamas in the Gaza Strip, which would drive a wedge between them and the West Bank, which was controlled by the Palestinian authorities, which would weaken Palestine as a whole. And they weren't just supporting them from afar either. Israeli intel agents traveled with Qatari officials carrying briefcase literally full of cash to directly fund Hamas. Frankenstein, meet Frankenstein's monster.
A hideous beast with deadly clutch.
In my opinion, Hamas is not the problem in and of itself in regards to everything Israel-Palestine. They are at most a symptom of a much larger issue. The issue being a hyper-fascist, militaristic state of Israel which has been imposing an illegal occupation and an apartheid upon Palestinians. They oppress the people of Palestine while indoctrinating their own people into believing that everything they're doing is justifiable and necessary. You cannot keep pushing people around and become the surprise Pikachu face when they eventually start fighting back. And you cannot deal with Hamas militarily. Every time you bomb them, bomb innocent civilians, those who rise from the rubble will understandably be filled with righteous anger, and you will have created more Hamas. No, the best way to deal with them with this entire conflict is to call for a permanent ceasefire, return hostages on both sides, end the occupation and the apartheid, and allow the right to return to Palestinians who have been driven off their lands, and work towards a true democracy in the region where everybody living there has equal rights. A one-state solution, if you will, where everyone lives together, no more stealing land, no more settlements. You call it what you will. Call it Israel-Palestine, Or better yet, just call it the state of the Holy Land. Whatever it is, everybody must learn to live together in peace. It's time for a new era. But of course, this is easier said than done. There are so many hurdles. The powers that be are very resistant to any real solution beyond heavily arming one side and then sending thoughts and prayers when they kill the other side. But there has been a sea of change in recent days. More and more people are seeing the destruction of Gaza and the belligerence of Israel's war crimes, using our tax dollars and weapons, by the way. More and more people are learning about the conflict and the history. More and more people, especially young people, are demanding a change, a real change, and you can't hide the truth from young people. You got the whole world watching, remembering the past and seeing history repeat itself, saying never again means never again. And you got this silly little TV show reminding us that it's always sunny in Palestine. Free Palestine.